Right, I've now received notice that Mr. Elliot Dean wishes to ask a question of the Leader of the Council. You have time to present your question, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Many residents across Maidstone have been affected by the introduction of the bedroom tax. Have overcrowded households, temporary accommodation users or waiting lists been significantly reduced in Maidstone since the rollout of the Welfare Reform Act 2012?
Thank you very much. Councillor Mrs Blackmore.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll try and be brief. Nice to see you again, Mr Dean. I'm sure you came to our last council meeting, but I'm sure there's nothing suspicious about that. As you've rightly said, welfare reform has made an impact. Our allocation policy changed in 2013, so it's difficult to compare the figures since with those before. But just to give you an idea, in April 2013 we had 1,120 on the list. Overcrowded households accounted for 206. April 2014 that had risen to 1,288 and the overcrowding issue was 302. On the good side though, since in 2012 there were 472 affordable homes built in the borough, 161 for the current year, and 253 empty homes have come back into circulation. So, as you can see, the Borough Council are doing all they can. In addition, we have our temporary accommodation, Aylesbury House, coming on stream at the end of this month. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Blackmore. Councillor Mrs Wilson.
In the interests of brevity, as the question was a very specific one and Councillor Blackmore has given the specific answer, I'm not going to add anything. I await the supplementary with interest.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Mrs Gooch, are you going to speak for yourself?
Don't I always, Mr Mayor? I won't respond because I think Councillor Annabel Blackmore gave quite a concise response to the concise question.
Thank you very much. Would the member representing the United Kent Partnership speak?
Mr Mayor, that's the first time you've got that right. I'm quite impressed by you now, you know. Yes, yeah. I'm not going to disagree with the facts or anything. The facts are the facts. But what I would say is I certainly detect a political undertone. And I think there's going to be another 3 motions coming up later which will follow the same lines. But there's the facts. Okay.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mr Mackay, would you like to respond?
I will allow my partner here in crime, Mr Paul Harper, or Councillor Harper, to respond on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you very much.
The Labour Party is very much opposed to the bedroom tax, and when we get into government we will repeal it as fast as is possible. I think the useful facts given to us by the Leader of the Council show that since the council tax was introduced, far from reducing overcrowding is actually increasing in the borough at the time, obviously, when a number of families are being penalised unfairly. But clearly we will have further discussion on this later.
Thank you very much indeed. Mr Dean, would you wish to ask a supplementary based on the response you've already had?
Yes, I do, Mr Mayor. Clearly in Maidstone, the bedroom tax hasn't worked to free up housing stock, which was the alleged idea of it. Therefore, it is victimising the people.
What is the question rather than a statement, please?
If you let me draw to a conclusion.
No, you have to ask a question, not make a statement.
What are the groups on this council going to do to oppose the bedroom tax, both locally and nationally?
Thank you very much for your question.
Mr Dean, that's a really interesting question for me, as I'm sure you can appreciate. Interesting question for the Liberal Democrats as well, because we're part of the current government. Not sure what to say to that one. That puts me in a very difficult situation. We do what we can for people on our housing lists, and we do as much as we possibly can. I've already indicated to you the figures that have been rolled out. We've got Aylesbury House that's come on stream. We've got Chillington House that's coming on stream, I think, later on next year. And I believe there's another property, Magnolia House, that will also be used for temporary accommodation. So that may not give you the complete answer that you want, but as a council, we are doing as much as we can.
Thank you, Mrs Blackmore. Councillor Mrs Wilson.
I'll be very brief. Andrew George took an early day motion at Parliament and gained major concessions. And also, if you know anything about conference, you'll know that the Liberal Democrats have already tabled quite an issue there, because generally across the country, Liberal Democrats and ourselves here are not happy with the bedroom tax.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Wilson. Councillor Mrs Gooch.
I actually agree with the bedroom tax, I'm afraid, because whilst this council is doing everything it can to provide homes for the homeless, which Councillor Blackmore has said, and I'm speaking purely for myself, I might be speaking for one of my other colleagues, but certainly not all of them. But the fact is that there are, shall I call them council homes, for want of a better phrase, where you've got one person in a large house, and we've got a long list of families that badly need homes, and that is a fact. As a council, we are doing what we can. So I, for one, would not support any such measure, for your information. However, we are at local level here, and I certainly support what the Borough Council is doing to help the homeless.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Gooch. Councillor Mr Powell.
Mr Dean, a very interesting question, and you will get an answer. But I've heard the word national mentioned tonight, and the reason why I'm saying this is because I may come up with something and say, what difference does European Union make to Maidstone Borough Council? So I'm a little bit concerned by the question, but what I'd say, I'm totally against the bedroom tax, but let's keep it to Maidstone Council, please.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Councillor Mackay.
I'll allow Councillor Harper.
OK, carry on, please.
Well, it's quite useful to hear the various groups answer Mr Dean's questions. Obviously, as I said earlier, Labour's totally opposed to the bedroom tax, and I'm quite pleased in terms of the council to hear that UKIP also are opposed to it, and clearly it sounds like the Liberals are opposing it at the moment. So hopefully later on tonight we can unite around that, but also show evidence from Mr Dean and others that Maidstone as a town is opposed to the bedroom tax.
Thank you very much. Members, we're almost back on schedule.